Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Before we begin with today's story, I want to give you the classic spiel. If you like what I do here, well, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment. It all helps me know that I'm making something you enjoy. And if you feel deeply obliged, consider checking out the Patreon link below where you can leave a tip. It's a little bare bones right now, but I'm working on that. Anyways, let's get back to today's story. Another from nosleep, this time from user aquariausangel. Let's begin. Stalker. Something is following me. I swear I can hear them at night, outside my tent. I went on this solo 7-day hike, and it wasn't until the 3rd day that I noticed something amiss. When I woke and exited my tent, my small, makeshift camp looked as if it had been ransacked. My supplies had been scattered, the small fire pit I made had been destroyed, as though a large beast had stepped on it. The scariest part was the footprints left behind. They were all over my camp. They circled the tent dozens of times and seemed to come to rest at the door before heading away into the woods. I hadn't heard anything while I slept and assumed it was just some other hikers playing a trick on me. After I gathered my scattered supplies, I started back down the trail. The hike I was on was a remote and technically difficult hike that even the most seasoned hikers would have trouble accomplishing, which is what made me confused. Why would experienced hikers do something like that to my camp? Most hikers took this sport seriously. Ruining supplies could be a quick way to dying from exposure. That day, I hiked long and far, taking switchbacks and pausing for minutes at a time to watch the trail behind me. The mountain was empty. I even removed some of my footprints in the dirt, hoping to make it harder to track me. That night, I packed all my supplies in my tent and waited, certain that no one would have been able to follow me. I gripped my flashlight in one hand and lay down in my sleeping bag waiting for a sound or a noise out of the normal sounds of the world. That's when I heard it, a twig snapping, a rustle of a bush, a rock being kicked and rolling across the ground. Tension shot through my body, and I froze, unable to move. My original plan was to rip open the tent door and shine the light in my would-be stalker's face, but the sound I heard made me lock up. This wasn't the sound of humans. I saw no lights and heard no boots. Instead, it was the shuffle of something bestial, a large bear or wolf pack. Instantly, the sounds grew closer, and I thought it had to be more than one animal, circling the tent, pawing at the ground, breathing heavy and hoarse. A small sound coming from the back of a throat that sounded like a throaty, demented version of a laugh was the noise they made as they circled the tent, never coming close enough to touch or even graze it. Fear struck me hard and fast, and my first reaction was to curl up in my sleeping bag, as if hiding from the world was the ultimate defense. Like a little kid defending himself from the monsters under the bed. Now I protected myself from the monsters outside my tent. The motion outside the tent exploded as the pace increased. The demented laughing was now coming from all sides, and I covered my ears, trying to block out the noise before it drove me mad. Then, like a breeze in the wind, they were gone. The sound slipped away into the night, and the torment stopped. My breath fell from my chest in what felt like minutes. I was terrified, and rightly so. Being alone on this mountain was always a bad idea. Hikers went missing here all the time. I had just assumed they were inexperienced and got lost, but now I knew it was something more. Something terrifyingly real. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay awake, unable to leave the tent for fear of their return. For the fear that they were waiting out there quietly for me to slip up and leave. When dawn's rays crested the hill to the east and bathed my tent in God's eternal light, I prayed for the first time in years. Normally, I'm not one for religious zealotry, but I fell to my knees in that morning light and begged with tears in my eyes for any of the gods to save me, to take me from this mountain. But nothing responded to my desperate plea. Now I felt truly alone. The camp was a mess. The ground was torn up by dozens of odd footprints. They overlapped so much that I couldn't get an accurate shape to one, but they were deep prints, indicating weight. Larger than a dog, at least, I said to myself as I traced my fingers in one of the prints. I glanced around the camp and saw the prints leading back down the mountain, the way I had come. I was already more than halfway through the hike, and it would take longer to go back the way I had come. Once I reached the peak, I could make my way down the opposite side into the parking lot where my truck was. By my calculation, it was around 3 more days, 2 more nights. I could make it. I hiked hard and fast that day and made great time. The mountain ended in a plateau and I rested for only a moment. Normally, I would spend the day at the top, find a nice place to camp, and bask in the world from my seat up high. Today, I left instantly, glancing only for moments to check my path. I could see my truck far below in the parking lot. The way down was a rocky path that normally I wouldn't attempt, but this was an emergency. The sun was getting low, and I needed to find a place to camp. As I reached the edge of the woods, I paused, watching the sun as it fell faster and faster. A small clearing lay out before me, full of long grass. To my back were tall, sturdy trees with lots of branches at odd angles, like they were protecting me from the beasts that lurk behind me. I decided to set up my tent in the clearing, a few feet from the trees, next to a fallen tree with its large mass of roots exposed to the night sky. I kept looking over my shoulder as I worked, knowing these creatures only came at night. Sweat beaded down my neck, and I took a moment when I was done to drink and eat quickly from my pack. I gathered a large amount of wood from the trees and used some of my emergency lighter fluid to start a large cooking fire outside the tent. With enough wood to burn for hours, an idea struck me while I ate and watched the trees. Taking my flashlight and gear, I made for the trees and climbed up. Among the branches, I found a secure spot where I could sit comfortably, and better yet, where I could watch my tent. For an hour, I sat in terrified silence, my heart beating out of my chest as I tried to calm myself. Maybe they wouldn't come tonight. Maybe I had made it far enough away they wouldn't be able to find me. That's when the noise started. A twig snapping, the rustle of a bush behind me, the careful steps of something coming closer and closer. I hugged tightly to the tree, keeping myself hidden from sight below. My eye was on the tent, making sure that whatever was doing this to me, tonight I would see them in the firelight of my camp below. The grass below my perch was now covered in darkness, but I could hear something moving in the grass. I held my breath, hoping to avoid detection. The creatures moved past me with no hesitation. I watched as shadows moved in the darkness below, too many of them to count in the poor light. They surrounded the tent and fire, silent as they moved. When one of them made that same noise from the back of their throat, it went, as if on signal. The campfire was scattered. Lit logs rolled and flew away as if something had swatted it with a giant hand. I could see bits of brown fur in the descending firelight, a large muscular paw, a hind leg, all covered in the same brown fur. Once the dark fell, They began their pacing, tearing up the ground around the camp, their back of the throat laughing, and I could hear my tent tearing. Deep growls of inhuman noise and heavy breathing for hours. They never left. They searched the same ground over and over again. As if blind until an hour before dawn, they quietly slunk away back up the mountains towards the peak. I hadn't slept at all again, and was feeling exhausted. My legs felt weak, and I slid down the last few feet of the tree, landing hard on my back. I lay there, breathing heavy as the sun bathed me in warm, life-saving light. My tent had been shredded to pieces, and I now had no doubt in my mind that they were hunting me. Blood was on the ground beside the fire where it looked like something had happened. Maybe the creatures had a fight amongst themselves during the night. I sighed, examining my tent, dropping the piece of it I held. I turned and made my way down the rocky trail. Gone were the lush trees and long grass of the peak, and once more I plunged into the rocky and steep trail to the base. The trail was slow going as I climbed down rock faces, and had to backtrack several times to find a different path down. I could not spend one more night in this place. Far below, I could see my old red pickup in the parking lot. Within my vision, but still so far away. If I had a base jumping kit, I could be down there in minutes instead of hours. At various spots, I had to anchor with ropes that had been placed by previous climbers. I praised them and their families for good fortune, as this put a large distance between me and the beasts. I traveled through the day and resolved myself to continue through the night. With no tent or cover, I would be torn to shreds by the beasts. As the sun began to set, I doubled my pace. I knew somewhere along here was the rappel site, a place with hundreds of feet of strong rope for you to descend the final drop. After that is a short 5-minute walk to the truck. I couldn't find the rappel spot. I knew it had to be around here somewhere, but I seemed to be lost. I had seen the rappel spot from my truck, but now I was on the mountain. I could have missed it in the dusk's light. I knew I had to backtrack slightly and made my way back up the mountain. Fear struck me again, knowing the beasts were coming. As I climbed, I saw a bright green rope hanging from a series of anchors in the rock. I attached my harness and walked backward off the rock. This was something I had done dozens of times, and I made good time. Halfway down, I rested for a moment as the sun set behind me. That's when I felt it. Something pulling on the rope above. It jerked and began swinging side to side. I dropped slightly before I felt something pulling me back up the mountain. I began to rappel with increased fervor and dropped down the mountain faster than I ever had before. I reached the bottom, but noticed the rope had shortened around 20 feet and was slowly getting higher. The ground below was rocky and rough, but I had no choice. I unclipped myself from the line and dropped quickly to the ground. I landed awkwardly on a stone with my left leg and felt my ankle twist awkwardly. I screamed out in pain as my leg burned. Despite this, I smiled. I had escaped. The beasts weren't going to catch me now. I could see my red pickup truck down the hill and rose to my feet. The pain was intense, but I kept going, knowing this was my only chance. Behind me, I heard the impossible. The sound of rocks being scattered as something heavy landed. I dared not glance over my shoulder, but doubled my pace. I could hear heavy breathing and movement behind me. A small glade of young trees lay directly in front of me, and I ducked into the thin branches for any sort of cover from the relentless pursuer. Came from behind me, and I froze, letting the foliage cover my body from sight. I barely dared to breathe as I heard the branches snapping around me. I could smell the foul breath of the beast as I crouched in a thin shield of branches and foliage. A poor armor indeed. Heavy breathing came closer and closer to me until was right beside my ear. The back of the throat laugh came right beside my ear, making fear shoot up my spine, paralyzing me to the spot. This was it. The end. Whatever this creature was, it was going to kill me. I chanced a glance in its direction and stared right into its repulsive face. It bore a resemblance to a shaved wolf with its skin pulled back, a large mouth filled with rows of dangerously sharp teeth, and a large, brown nose like a dog's. Saliva dripped from its open mouth as it breathed in air in ragged breaths. The oddest part was its eyes. They were all white, filled with clouds, almost as if the creature was blind. I sat perfectly still as the creature was within feet of me. It had a hunched back, almost human, but it moved on all fours like an animal. The creature smelled the air briefly before growling and moving away through the foliage, making the sound as it left, as if it were mocking my fear of it. The creature couldn't see. I assumed it reacted to movement, sound, or smell, perhaps all three. As the creature moved away, I quietly limped in the opposite direction towards my truck. Finally, I was in the parking lot and into my truck. I locked the doors behind me and lay down on the seat, breathing for a moment, planning my next move. With a jerk, I started the truck and my old faithful girl turned on in a single stroke. I flicked on my headlights as my heart stopped. In front of my truck was a dozen or so of the beasts, all crouched over, their eyes a milky pale, unseeing. As my headlights hit their eyes, the beasts changed. They covered their eyes in pain as I put the truck into drive. As I stepped on the gas, I realized my mistake. The fire that one night in the tree. The way they attacked it. With a smash, I felt one of them ram into my tailgate. I sped off down the road, swerving to avoid them. In my rearview mirror, I could see them chasing me down the dark mountain road, and I sped up, keeping ahead of them. My ankle throbbed painfully, but I felt nothing as my adrenaline peaked again and again, as my fear warped into new things by the moment. The last thing I saw was their pale eyes in the darkness as I turned the corner onto the highway. By the time I saw the other cars and people, I knew I was safe. I drove nonstop for hours until I made it back to my place. The sun was just about to set as I locked the door behind me. I breathed a sigh of relief and poured myself a glass of scotch to calm my nerves. I fell against my bed and took a sip of my drink before I lay back in the blankets, exhausted from my flight and the creatures chasing me. I fell asleep in minutes. I woke up in the middle of the night to something outside my house. It sounded like something rubbing up against my front door. My heart froze as I thought of what could be out there. A slight knocking at the door, just loud enough for me to hear, before a sound that chilled me to my bones. A deep laugh coming from the back of someone's throat. It went. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The story in this video was read with the author's permission. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit post. Want to support me? Check the link below where you can leave a tip if you wish. And remember, don't let the shadows get too close. Good night.